Let's kick this off from the very beginning. You just had your initial phone screening with the recruiter. The call went great. A couple days later, you get that email that says, hey, so-and-so, love chatting with you. We want to see what you can do. We would love to move on to the next phase of the interview. So here's a take-home project we would like you to complete. Here's all the details. So here you are. Now's your time to shine. Let's showcase what you can do. Let's dive into this project brief and talk about what we're going to build. But before we do that, let's talk about kind of the wide variety of take-home projects that you can get. And real quick, you're probably only going to get a take-home project from a smaller company or a super small startup. You know, the Googles, the Apples, Facebooks of the world, they're not giving take-home projects. So just so you have that context. But I'm going to talk about two types that you can normally get. And the first one is where you get a full-blown design spec, as you see here. Like, here's an example of one I got from DoorDash in early 2017, so almost 3 years ago now. And you can see I had a very specific screens, very specific design to build. And even the features of the app were very specifically laid out. So there was no like nuance in what I had to build. You know, of course, there's nuance in how I built it, how I structured my code, right? Of course, that's what I'm being judged on. But that's going to be there no matter what project you give. So I would call this I don't want to call it easy, but this is the easier of the two, because again, you're getting exactly what you need to do. We're not going to do that type of take-home project. Like I said in the intro, we're going above and beyond, right? I want to teach this in like hard mode. So if you do get an easier one, you know, hopefully you should be good to go because you've got practice on the harder one. So that leads us to the second type of take-home project, which this one is, and that is the more open-ended one. And they're open-ended intentionally. And that's because at smaller companies and startups, maybe the iOS team is only 1, 2, 3 people, right? So you have to wear many hats and you'll probably have a lot of input on the product. So these open-ended ones want to see like what type of product you build. They don't want you to just follow the instructions on the code, right? They want to see what kind of design you come up with, how you structure the information, what information you choose to show. So that's the type of project we're going to do. Because again, I feel like that's the more nuanced, where the more learning is. Again, that other one is almost like paint by numbers when it comes to building the product. Of course, the code is different. So anyway, that's what we're going to build. But those are the two main types. To be honest with you, I think the more common one is the one where you get the full-blown design spec and super detailed instructions. I think that's more common, just, you know, so you're aware of what's out there. But again, we're going to go above and beyond in this course. So let's move on to this brief, right? We just got that email. We're pumped. We passed our phone screen. Now we got the brief. Let's open it up here. So you see, overview. This project is intentionally open-ended. We want to see what you create when it's all up to you. The project will be assessed on your code quality, UI, UX, and overall quality and feel of the app. So kind of like I just said, you know, we want to see what kind of product you create all on your own. Down to the app premise here. This kind of tells you what the app is supposed to do. The user can enter a GitHub username and retrieve a list of that username's followers. Okay, so I type in a name, hit the API, get the list of followers. Okay, got it. The user can search within these followers for a specific follower. Okay, so I'm going to get a big long list of followers. I need to be able to search through it. Okay, I kind of know where I'm going to go with that. The user is able to tap on a follower from that list to get more information about that follower. Okay, so I got the list of followers, cool. Tap on it, new screen with their information. All right, sounds reasonable. The user is able to save favorite username searches so they don't have to type them in every time. This needs to persist between app launches. Okay, persistence. Looks like I just need to save a username in order to query. Right, because I need to pull in their data. So, okay, so it looks like I'm probably just going to be saving a username in user defaults. You know, we'll revisit that. Right now, what I do in my head when I get this is I don't figure out exactly how I'm going to do it. I try to get a rough idea, like, okay, I'll probably do that, probably do that. Of course, things change, but as I'm going through, I'm like, okay, this is a very doable project. Like, I understand what's going on. So if we scroll down to the requirements here, 100% programmatic UI, no storyboard. All right, I kind of like storyboard, but all right, I get it. Okay. No third-party libraries. All right, never done that before. But the reason why I wanted to do no third-party libraries was because, you know, I've given a take-home project before, and even on a small project, when you get one that has like 7 libraries in it, it's just like what, like, you know, I mentioned this in the intro. You kind of judge that. It's like, wow, you brought in a library for every little task. Like, you know, that's probably not good on this small project. Like, what are you going to do on like a huge project? Whereas a project that got submitted with no third-party libraries, like that was more impressive. Now, I do want to be clear. I'm not preaching like you should never use third-party libraries in any of your take-home projects. No, obviously don't use 7, but you know, 1 or 2 is probably fine. But I do want to say that it probably will be more impressive if you don't use any. And that's why I wanted to teach it this way. Again, like I said, this course, I know I say it's based on the typical take-home project, but we're kind of doing the hard mode of the typical take-home project. Because it's like training, right? You want to train way harder than you actually play the game. So that's kind of the idea here. And scrolling down to details, use the GitHub API. No authentication needed. Okay, so we're not doing OAuth to verify anything. Cool. We're going to use the followers endpoint in the user info endpoint. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because I had to get the list of followers, and then now I got to get all the info about the user. We're going to dive into that in a little bit once I finish the overview. Okay, when showing more information about a user, what information you display is up to you. If you were creating this product, what information do you think users would want to see? So this is where, like I said, the nuance comes in, right? The test here is, if you're creating a product, like, what information do you think, as somebody using GitHub followers that wants to see list of followers, like, what information about a GitHub user do you find valuable that other developers would be searching for? So that's kind of the test there, is to see what information you display and how you display that information, right? Because of course you can make one giant screen with a million things of information. It's like, well, that, yeah, you got all the information on there, but there's, you don't want to overwhelm the user. So this is the test here to see, again, what type of product you create. And then moving on to the design, kind of like I just said, we want to see what kind of design you come up with. We don't expect you to be a professional designer, but we believe our developers should have a rudimentary design knowledge. And like I said, typically a take-home project is for a small startup, smaller company. The iOS team is probably going to be very small. So you're probably gonna have to wear many hats. You may contribute to design, you may contribute to the product. So that's why having these overall skills is good in this situation. And I do want to stress real quick, I don't want to scare people off that you have to know all this stuff. Like I said, in this course, we're going above and beyond, right? What we do in this course is going to be way more than what's needed for the typical take-home project. But like I said before, I want to teach and I want to train you on all the hard stuff, so you're ready, right? Most likely you're going to get an easier project than this, most likely. So again, don't be scared that holy crap, I don't know any of this, I'm way overwhelmed. Again, we're going above and beyond here. And then, please don't hesitate to ask any clarifying questions about the project. You're definitely going to get this, and feel free to ask. If you do have questions, shoot them an email, ask them. You'll get a due date, February 18th, whatever, that's just a made up date. But, and oftentimes, I forgot to put it in this brief, but oftentimes they'll tell you we expect this to take 3 to 5 hours, 2 to 4 hours, some time range, right? So they do let you know, how much they expect you to spend on it, right? And again, they may say 3 or 4, and it's up to you, right? Everybody's got different living situations. If you choose to take it and spend 12 hours on it, that's up to you. Just know that you're competing for a spot. That's all I'll say. I'm not going to recommend anything. Just, you're in competition. Just keep that in mind. Best of luck. Can't wait to see what you create. Okay, so that's the overview. Let's scroll back up. We're going to talk about how I started piecing all this together. So starting with the app premise, right? Because this tells me what the app does. And now if I pull up the, handy dandy iPad, my iPad sketches here, you can see how I started designing this. And by the way, you don't need an iPad. Pen and paper works fine. But you can see, I was like, okay, I need to enter a username, pass that name over to, in this case, is a collection view, and show the followers, right? That's the first kind of requirement. The first kind of decision I had to make, right, when we're talking about creating this product is how do I want to display these followers, right? Okay, the basic easy thing is a list table view. Okay, cool, but that's kind of tedious, right? You can, on a list table view, you can probably only show 10 to 12 at a time, maybe even less, depending on how big your cells are. Okay, and my initial thought actually was to make a cool, like the modern day, app store looking thing where each user was in a big card. It looked beautiful. You just swipe through it. But remember, followers, a person could have 3,000 followers, right? So swiping through 3,000 beautiful cards, that's a bit tedious, So that's why I felt like this grid collection view was the best way to display this information, right? Because you can, 100 users, you can scroll through pretty quickly in this type of format versus swiping through cards, or even the list view will kind of get tedious. So that was the first design decision I had to make was, okay, how do I actually display all these followers in the best way possible? So like I said, that's how I landed on the grid view. You can see I added the little favorites heart up here and the search thing. I knew I was going to have the navigation controller with those kind of default buttons up there. Also putting it in a tab bar because I knew I was going to have the favorites down in the left. So I knew the one piece of the tab bar was going to be the search screen. The other piece was going to be the favorites, so you can tap back and forth. So I knew I was going to put this into a tab bar. And that's, as you see here in the lower left, that's the table view of favorites that we're going to pull from user defaults. In my mind, I was like, okay, I'm just going to need a username. That's why you see Sean, Steve, Jordan, whatever. And then when they tap on Sean in that table view, it's just going to pull up the same search screen. So we're going to reuse that search screen, whether they get to it from typing in a username or tapping on a favorites. And then here in the lower right, I kind of have my I knew I wanted it to be a modal, right? I knew I wanted them to tap on the follower and a modal would slide up that they can dismiss or take an action on. So you see, I knew I kind of wanted the avatar in the upper left and the name real big. And then after that, I just started listing the information that I thought I would want to show. There's no like design here, right? I was just like, let me just throw the information here. And while we're here, let's talk about how I decided to put that information in. So here we are at the GitHub API documentation. If we scroll down to users, click on user, get a single user. This is where we're going to talk about what information we want to display. And I'm going through this exercise to show you how I decided to show the information I wanted to show. Again, if you go back to this GitHub design here, you can see I kind of wrote in all the information I want. And what I did was I just went to the GitHub documentation. And the great thing about the documentation is you can see the JSON response you're going to get back. So this is all the data I'm going to get back. And I went through and just kind of picked out, what data I wanted to display. Because again, we're creating our own product. It's up to me. That's part of the test. And actually, I don't know. I don't like looking at it like this. What I did, and a little trick here, this URL here is actually the users you can see. And that's just for Octocat. So I like to look at real data. That's kind of like dummy data. So if you go to your terminal, type in curl. So curl is how you can kind of ping an API. And then, so type in curl space command V for that, except we don't want Octocat. We want SALLEN0400. You can type in whatever user you like, but this will pull up real data. And let's make this bigger so people can see it. So this is, me, all the stuff I would get back on my user. So what I did was I pulled this up and I literally just went down the list. Yeah, I want to show the login. Avatar, definitely going to need to show the avatar. So I get that URL. This is all kind of, weird stuff up here. The other URLs that you can type if I want to get other stuff. But yeah, I want to showcase the name. I want to showcase the company, maybe the blog, location, how many repos, how many followers they have, that kind of stuff. So how I came up with this information is literally going through this list and kind of building the product that I thought was best. And the funny thing is, if we go back to the GitHub design, you can see here, I have company, blog, email. You see this top thing. But if you notice in the final design, I don't have that. What ended up happening as I was building this, and my point is that sometimes things change, is that most of the users didn't put in their personal email, didn't have a blog, didn't have a company attached to them. So that was coming back null very, very, very often. And, of course I could hide the UI based on null, but it was just very inconsistent. So I felt like it wasn't as useful for the product. So that's why I removed it. Again, these are the type of decisions that you can make. And then also, have the discussion, because the second part of the interview usually is, okay, let's talk about your take-home project. So if you can intelligently talk about your decisions and the reasoning why you got rid of them, whether they agree with them or not, the fact that you can articulate your thought process is the key here. So again, I want to talk about my thought process a lot and how I came up with this. So that's why we went through this little exercise here. So back to my iPad design, as you can see here, we talked about that screen where I wanted to show all that information. You can see my first iteration, I had the GitHub button, the blog button, and the follower button all at the top small. But why I moved away from this was because I thought the bottom, which would be all the rest of the information, would just be like a wall of text. And I didn't like that. So we moved on to this design here, kind of what you saw in the final design, where I kind of made little cards for each little section, right? I logically grouped, right? You have this header information with the name, location, bio. Again, the company email, website, the repos, and get the GitHub profile. So again, I logically grouped each information together and then made a little card around that. And then, like I said, this website company email section was causing a lot of problems. So I just decided, it wasn't worth it for this project. So again, those are the decisions you'll have to make. So you can see how I actually started with the design on creating this. And then here you can see what I ended up with in the final. And I used Sketch to build this. So I went from this app drawing in the iPad to going over to Sketch to, fleshing out this design in Sketch. So I hope that illustrated the process a bit to where, you get the initial brief in the email, how you dissect the brief a little bit, how you start sketching it out on pen and paper or iPad, whichever you choose, and then how you kind of build it from there, how you dissect the JSON to see actually what information you're going to get, what you want to display. I hope all that helped to show you the process. That is how I got to this Sketch design that you see. And then from here on out in the course, when we start building, we're going to be using this Sketch design for reference. But I wanted to go through all this to show you how I got to that Sketch design. And hopefully that was helpful. So in the next video, we're going to start building. Let's go.